Welcome to my Ashes of Creation Mage Guide. I'm not going to turn this into a build video. I really don't do well with builds, but I think I could definitely give some advice to making your Mage gameplay more fun, cause plenty of damage, and just in general some tricks on what we want to do. I'm going to start pretty much from the beginning here. In my opinion, there's going to be some preference work, obviously, but overall, Fireball is my favorite skill to get first. This is going to give you damage, it cools down real quick, and just in general is very nice bread and butter, and you should follow that with Combust, okay? You want to get these in straight away, and as you can see in my lineup here, these are pretty much going to be the first abilities that we want to get and use. These are pretty much your bread and butter spells. Just make sure you've got those. The enemies here are probably a little bit high level for me to just start fights with just two skills, but the point here being we can whack out some fire like that, put the Combust on there, and that, as you can see, is going to have most enemies taking quite a lot of damage and allow us to keep on throwing out the fire bolts so that we can defeat the enemies in front of us. Looking at the other abilities that we have down here, and you could technically leave this for later, but I think having the damage bonus to your burn on your main attack, which is then combined with Combust, is what is going to do work for you. I'm going to explain some of this a little bit because it kind of shows you how the Mage works. We're looking at a lot of status and a lot of procs that we have to do if we want to get the most out of it. Bombardment is going to basically give us a bit of extra burning damage, as you can see, and is going to apply Stagger. Stagger isn't going to affect any of this right now, so you could leave this to later if you'd prefer. A quick touch on the ice skills then. Frostbolt is actually not a bad contender, but I feel like its damage is just too much lower than the fire skills. I get one Frostbolt with a 12-second cooldown, 250% damage, okay. Or we can have 3 charges of 150% damage with 75 burn and 3 charges and cools down in 8 seconds for each charge. So just overall, this is going to give you much more bang for your buck, just way better. But there is an argument for this because it does cause chill, which is a slow. So this is pretty good if you are solo a lot or if you are in a group. It can save your tanks and your healers and stuff a lot of effort if you are chilling enemies, but we're going to touch more on that in a bit because we can get chill from other places. Lightning Strike looks like it should be cool because it's a big charge up spell, but even fully charged, it's 300% damage, which again is just outshined by firing off 3 firebolts. So overall, not great. The update adds additional shock. If I bring shock up for you guys, is it going to show me? Here we go. Shock means whenever something hits the enemy that you put the proc of shock on, it's going to do an additional 25% lightning damage. Note that the Arcane Volley is not in my main lineup. I've got it over here somewhere and I basically never use it anymore. That's because the 7 shots that we get out of this strips all of the shock off of the enemies when you're trying to do that. And when you get later into the build, shock is important for making certain things happen when you are trying to do damage. So this ability actually ends up being good early on. So it's like a nice spell as you're leveling up. But later on, you're going to take that out of your build because it just strips shock off of enemies, which is a problem when you want to use this ability, which means that when something is shocked and you're using your burn on them, they take more damage. You're stripping that off yourself. That's just not great. And the reason you're putting 10 on when you add shock is because everybody benefits from it. So when you put that 10 stacks of shock on there, everybody's attacking and they're going to be taking off those shock procs. If you take 7 off yourself, you are never going to get to benefit from that shock. So overall, Lightning Strike, it sounds cool. The ability looks great. It's really fun to use, satisfying, but I just don't think it's great. All of these beginning abilities are just overshadowed by the fire abilities at the beginning. I'm sorry that I've hammered on that too much, but that's just kind of the way that it falls for me. That brings us to the next level then, and we have either Shell for the defense, or we have Blink. Both are pretty good. I'm going to go with Blink at this stage because sometimes an enemy's going to run up on you, and if, like me, you can rejig your mouse buttons, right? That's why this is in a funny place to me. I could just turn, press the mouse button that I've assigned it to, and I can be gone. So if something's coming up at me and I really need to get away, that is my little emergency button. So we want to make sure that we have that. This actually wasn't good. I didn't used to recommend this to people, but they've fixed the recovery time on it, so this is actually pretty good now. Which gets us to the next level, and we have our first instance of a status that we can now start cycling as a mage, but we don't have everything we need to do it. I will demonstrate this once we are a little bit further into the video, but at this stage we have 2 choices. If you are going to be solo or in a small group, then Hoarfrost, but technically speaking, if you're with anybody at all, you should bring Enchant Weapon. The reason you want Enchant Weapon is because this will actually give weapon damage of the element that you choose onto an enemy. Now, right now, we only have fire as an option. So if we cast a fire ability, that's going to give us the elemental weapon fire, which means now if I select a friendly person and put that on, they're going to do additional fire damage. And not only going to do fire damage, they're going to proc the status of fire for us. So when that becomes important later on, we can actually use the melee or whoever's doing the most auto attacking in our party to to apply those procs to enemies as well as do extra damage. Any mage that's not running this just isn't using the mage right. I'm sorry. Some people are going to agree, some people can disagree, but it's just true. That gets us to the next line, which means we can have Lightning Ball. Amazingly powerful spell. There's absolutely no reason to not have this in your loadout all the time, and it benefits a lot from Shatter. So we now need to get to level 12 before we can get to this top line right here, and I believe, if I count right, this should bring us to 6. So we have some other things that we want to do. Now, this can also apply shock procs, which is why I'm not taking my shock procs from here. I'm going to get them from this later on, but we don't need them right now because we don't have fuse. So we're going to take Hoarfrost because that's free chill, and then we're going to take Cone of Cold with its upgrade to push enemies back. This now gives us the ability to freeze. What we actually need to do is place this out on the ground. When something gets closer, we use the Cone of Cold, and that is now going to make it so that we can freeze stuff, which means we go ahead and we get Shatter. Let's see if we can actually make this happen on an enemy, because now everything that we've got in this little set of skills is working together, because now the stagger on that enemy matters. Because what does stagger do? It makes sure that we are able to use more disable type abilities, which chill is. So we can now throw this out something, put Hoarfrost on it to slow it down, freeze it, and then if we had a lightning attack, which we do, you put Lightning Ball on, and that's going to do additional damage, as you can see from the Shatter here, doing a lot of damage. Let's have a quick look at this, shall we? There we have it. We can now basically decimate anything that walks at us. We actually have a good selection of damage types as well, because we've got plenty of AoE in here. We have something that can knock enemies away, and we're able to escape. So our toolbox is looking pretty good right now. And so from here, let's look at some other skills that we're going to use to continue improving this. I'm sure you're probably looking at some of this top row stuff and you're wanting it immediately, and all of it is kind of cool. The only one I don't really like is Arcane Circle, because it forces you to stay still, and I just don't think that's a very good advantage for us. Some of these spells require to get close. We've got Blink that allows us to escape. So this one, for me, kind of, I don't know, it's a bit weird. It makes the mage work a little bit weirdly, but it is a pretty big damage increase. If you look at it, it's going to give you 30% increased magical power, which is pretty strong. But if you look at Volatile, which is why we want Lightning Ball, we're going to make them take more damage anyway, because we're actually reducing their magic defense, the magical mitigation on the enemies once we hit with Volatile. So this becomes a part of your rotation. So if you want to do some big damage, you want to hit with this first, and then you might come in with something like Prismatic Beam. But we're going to leave that for a second, because we want good access to all of the elements before we get Prismatic Beam, because that is actually very important, and the element you use is going to depend on the enemies that you're fighting. But the main thing that we're missing right now is shock application. So I assume it's a little bit obvious that's what we're going to be going for. We're going to get Chain Lightning. We don't necessarily need Aftershock, but we are getting Stagger from our base ability. So I think that is auto take, in my opinion. We're going to make this hit twice if we've hit with a Fireball first. And that's going to be all of the shock that we need, which is good. And so now we're in a position where we can freeze enemies, which means we can take advantage of Shatter. We can now apply Shock when we need to, which means now we can look at putting Fuse on. And this makes it so that your burning statuses are 50% more powerful to a shock target. So that's going to mean that now if we hit with this first, before this, the burns are going to do even more damage. And then in case you didn't notice on Combustion, we have Conflagration, which is going to boost those dots by 30% and then shorten the dot time to 4 seconds. Let's see if we can even do this full combo on something as simple as a zombie. We're going to hit with a Fireball to get the first Stagger on there. We're going to get some Shock on there, use the last Fireballs, and then we're going to Conflagrate. Don't vomit on me, which is going to make very light work of most enemies, okay? And in a one-on-one situation, when you're a similar level to the enemy, should not be an issue. And I'm getting like 1500 XP on my own solo, which is rather nice. I can actually level on my own right now. This makes us a very versatile level 14-ish mage, which is rather cool. And now it's time for us to start filling things in. So first of all, I think the best thing to get at this point is going to be Prismatic Beam. We are now able to switch this to whichever one we want. So you can see all of the different effects that we can have from this on there. One of the biggest advantages of this, though, in my opinion, is the fire and the ice. Chill is like neither here nor there. It'll keep enemies away from you. It's kind of nice that it's there. But the only real ways to freeze enemies after you've shielded them is Blizzard or Cone of Cold. So it's not really providing that for us. The main two things you want to look for are the fire and the lightning ones. And it's going to depend on what amount of enemies you are facing. Generally speaking, if it's one-on-one, you want it to be fire. So you might want to go Firebolt, Combust, and then put Prismatic Beam on. Or if you wanted to, because this can apply even more burn procs, you could go Fireball, Prismatic Beam, Beam into Combust, have that all go on there nice and stacked like that. The lightning one, however, the interesting thing about the lightning one is not only does it do good damage, 33% chance to trigger an arcing bolt up to 2 times, dealing 35% additional damage and applying volatile. So what that means is if you've got like a group of enemies, it's going to start spiking out all of the other enemies, and it is fantastically damaging against groups. So if you're in like a farming party and you've got a tank that can gather like 10 enemies, this is going to absolutely wipe them out. It's disgusting. It's amazing, and I love it. From here at my level, and of course I'm level 20, I'm not at the cap of 25 yet, so I still have to make some choices about what I want, okay? The next most important thing is probably to get the unyielding blink. Shouldn't be a massive issue most of the time. But basically, if you get caught by some kind of stun, you can now get out of it with your blink, which is rather nice. And we're going to get shell for the times when something gets to you and blink is not available. It's just basically blink 2.0, right? I have it right here. Just kind of click on it when something's coming at me and I can't get away. And then we're going to go ahead, we're going to grab Blizzard, because Blizzard is also very strong. And we're going to talk about some tricks with things like this in a minute, because if you've got multiple mages, you can do some cool stuff with Blizzard, because Blizzard will actively chill and freeze enemies at the same time, and lasts a good few seconds. So if somebody is casting Prismatic Beam into your Blizzard across a lot of enemies, they can be repeatedly proccing shock, which is just disgusting. It's amazing damage between 2 mages. At this point, you can do pretty much whatever you want. You could do Magma Field. I don't like it very much, even with the faster cast speed. Let me show you how long this takes to go up, right? So if you cast this out, it takes a good second for that to go up, right? So when your tank's trying to draw stuff in, you've got to try and time that for when something gets to it. And I just don't like that very much. I don't enjoy Magma Field at all. So I am not a fan of Magma Field. I don't use that very much at all. You have to wait for that to cool down. And we've already spoken about, we don't really care about Charged Lightning. You could get Charged Lightning, some extra shock procs, you know, I guess 2 points you could do that. Could get additional Frostbolt. This kind of turns it into a cool AoE if you attack a shocked target. But we're planning to use shock on our fireballs, so this probably doesn't really make much sense. We could take Thermal Equilibrium. This gives you kind of like the unholy cycle of the mage, where you kind of want to freeze an enemy, shatter an enemy, fuse an enemy, and then equilibrium an enemy, right? So because you're going to go shatter for the additional damage, that should put shock on it because you've just used lightning attack. Because you've used lightning attack, now you want to use fire so that you can proc your burning, right? Now because you proc your burning, you want to proc some frozen because you can conflagrate at the end of the burning. And then because you've got frozen on there, you should be shattering it. That is your like ultimate cycle. But realistically speaking, it's very difficult to get the cycle to go around on your own. So if you're going to try and do like kind of all of it, you may want to split that up between other people. And so for my last 2 points, I'm going to finish off. And so up until this point, I've just liked carrying around Arcane Circle in case a situation comes up where I'm standing still a lot and I want to drop it. And then just because it rounds things out, I'm going to finish off my blink. After this, of course, there's still 5 more points for me to spend. And there are 1, 2, 6, 7, 8. We are running out of choices, right? There's only going to be 3 of these that we don't get. So you could take this just because it's extra shock if you wanted. You could take this because it's extra chill. And then Slumber. Now, Slumber's an interesting one. I haven't spoken about it much. But basically, you are going to put enemies to sleep. And as far as I can tell, as mages, we don't have anything that doesn't wake enemies up. But bards do. We haven't tested how interesting that is yet. Whether or not you can put like a high-level enemy to sleep. Have a bard rush down loads of its health with one of its attacks. But yeah, so far we haven't toyed with this yet. And that brings us to the end of the skills in general. Some other tricks that are going to be cool and worth knowing then. Let's talk about some cool stuff that we can do with Ball Lightning. Trick number 1. Let's bring this guy in over here. Let's have it come towards me. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cast Ball Lightning at it. And we're going to blink through and make the Ball Lightning follow it along, doing a rather shocking amount of damage. And another kind of cool trick we can do, which is a little bit similar, is we can cast the Ball Lightning, blink, and then Blizzard. So I just thought I'd give you guys some kind of interesting solo combo options that you could use to your advantage that we have. Obviously, you guys should play around with all of these different abilities, change around the prismatic beam so that, you know, you can go ahead and use it in the correct spots. Like, for example, if I was struggling with that, I could have turned around, put the prismatic beam on. That would have just toasted the end of the enemy. Moving on to equipment then. Basically, we want to be stacking as much intelligence as we can for damage. That's what's going to be really, really good for us. Obviously, spell penetration is going to be nice. Obviously, getting an ideal set of gear is actually pretty difficult in Ashes of Creation right now, but we're looking pretty good. Realistically, the only main thing to be talking about is the armor, and I actually like using medium armor set. We attract a lot of aggro in this game, and having balanced armor just feels really good. And once we get to like good medium pieces, we should be proccing some extra movement speed and stamina regen as well, which is rather nice. But ultimately speaking, the weapons are the most important things to talk about. I think having a big spell two-handed weapon is good. It gives you a big bonus to your magical power rating, and then you want a wand and a focus. The reason that you want a wand and a focus over a book is because this actually improves your casting's time. So I quite like this, and we also have one of the focuses that gives additional mana regen. It's not exactly world breaking, but it is something that we are caring about. So just make sure that you get something like that. If you want to know where the Nordhorn's one comes from, it comes from a boss that is inside. If you want to know where the Nordhorn focus comes from, it comes from a boss that is inside the Ursine Caves. You will need to be fairly high level to get it, and it is a level 20 item, so you probably shouldn't hunt that until you're at least level 19. And lastly, just in case you don't know, let me get my inventory up over here. You can also very cheaply get these Scrolls of Intelligence and fruit salads. These are 9 copper each, so not massively expensive. And they're pretty easy to get. All you need to do is go over to the Briarmore Farm. You can see it's pretty close to Lionhold. And then you just come over to this pier over here. You see how we've got this little kind of pond. And this guy here, this cookhouse, that's going to sell you the fruit salad. And you're going to get the scrolls from the dude over at the library. This is just going to allow you to do additional damage. It's going to make your time going through the game significantly easier. On to some weapon passives then. When it comes to your wand or your spellbook, it should be pretty much the same on the spellbook. But come over to the wand and set the element that you think is going to advantage you the most. I like to have volatile proccing a lot, but if you're trying to do a lot of freezing, we can get some additional chill out of this. Or if you want some extra burn on there, you can. But I like volatile. So let's just naturally make them more vulnerable to spells, because that's just real nice. And then we're basically just proccing as much duration and application of that as possible. I didn't really go for that much damage out of my wand because I just don't feel like we're doing most of our damage from it. So that's realistically the only target for the wand itself. Mine's pretty much fully done, I think, for the alpha. I don't know how high that's going to go. And then once you reach the last tier, all of your last points are going to want to go into here for Spell Echo and Deadly Finisher. I don't really want to touch on this too much because I just don't feel like this is, well, it kind of is mage specific, but it's just not really interacting with our spell loadout too much. Okay, we're just going to use it to make it so that enemies take more damage from us when we're using spells. That's really all we're getting out of this. For the stamina side of things, this just kind of goes up as you level, right? I've not even looked at it for a while, as you can see. The one to get first, in my opinion, is the dodge distance, because, you know, blink's gone, shell's gone, I still need to dodge because my party's doing badly. It's good to just have a little bit of dodge on there. And then the second wind is also kind of nice. It just means that if you sprint a lot, when you stop, you recover stamina faster. It's kind of nice to have. I can't imagine us ever wanting to guard in the front as a mage. I guess you could, but not too bothered about this kind of right-hand side line of skills right now. I hope this stamina tree gets worked on a little bit because it kind of seems pretty simple to me. And by the time I hit level 25, we're actually going to have this fully filled out. So there's nothing kind of build specific to talk about in here. But I thought I'd touch on it all anyway in case people want to see these screens. Like I haven't even touched my two-handed sword stuff because I'm never going to be in close combat. So that's just not happening, is it? And that is everything. If there's anything you guys want to add or think that I should have mentioned, let me know in the comments, and I'll catch you all in the next one.